Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the Middleton Westport Joint Zoning Committee meeting to order. Do a roll call attendance of who's here.
Sure.
So I will start with myself. Pichette present.
Okay, Kennedy,
Present.
Mannering. Mary's not here. Adams,
Here.
Harp,
Here.
and Summers.
Here.
Do we have John Kusha here tonight? Nobody's here. Dean, we don't have a substitute?
No, we don't.
Okay,
My understanding is Mary will be joining us.
okay. All right. So, hearing that, we'll move on. Public comment, since this is a Zoom meeting, if anybody would like to make a public comment, if they could raise hand or speak up and let us know that you're here to make a comment.
I only see 6 people present,
Okay,
so that's basically no public.
perfect. Thank you, Mark. So hearing none, we'll move on. Approval of minutes from the January 24th, 2024 meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Kennedy. Anybody like to second?
This is Adams. I'll second.
Second by Adams. Any comments, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So Mark, you moved on me. I don't know what the next item of business was.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. All right, so we have to discussion, take actions on a potential revision to the extraterritorial zoning regulations, Middleton Code of Ordinance, Chapter 35. Mark, would you like to present?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. We have kind of a conundrum here, as we've alluded in, I think, the last meeting. We have now we have 2 applications pending that are requesting CSMs that would be associated with rezonings to categories that are technically considered temporary zoning classifications in our zoning ordinance. This is not a new issue with the zoning ordinance we adopted this past fall. This is an issue that has been the situation with the temporary classifications has been around for over 20 years. Dean and I have discussed this as well, and we've noticed that in the past there was a request to, I think it was the Jankowski application back in 2021 that wanted C1, or was it C2, Dean? I can't remember. I think it was C1. And at the time, and we found this out today from Tom Wilson, the decision was made to rezone a remnant parcel to C1. Technically, that was not allowed under our zoning ordinance, ETZ ordinance. So we have the same situation facing us now with the application for Krusheks, which wants to have a parcel that would be a remnant parcel that would be well, A2 is really what it would be. They say ag, but they mean A2 would be the best fit. And then we have an application for Yahara Materials that wants to have a commercial zoning classification. And our code as drafted, and has been drafted now for over 2 decades, would not technically allow that. The intent is to go to a City of Middleton zoning classification. As you all know, with the new zoning code that we adopted at the city, we have gone in a direction that may not be as compatible for Westport's liking. We have no freestanding commercial, for example. Anything that's commercial is a mixed use classification. And so what we are talking about doing is in fact, today we had this discussion, Dean and I, with Tom, is maybe what we should do is take all the temporary zoning classifications that were supposed to be originally they were county zoning districts and have those, instead of being temporary, just making them eligible for rezoning. So you could rezone from one to another. That would be one way to do it. What I said in my memo was, so making more temporary districts permanent, we could just do a few of them. We could do all of them. That would be one option. We could introduce new zoning classifications as option 2. Either something, Dane County has overhauled its ordinances. We could incorporate some of those, like the small lot farmland preservation district, or just maintain the status quo and tell people either they can't rezone to one of these classifications or they need to rezone to a city classification. So before I modify our ordinance, I wanted the committee's input. Any modifications to the ordinance will require a public hearing before both this body and the common council. That's my background.
Okay, Dean, do you want to add anything here? Okay. I'm assuming not.
Sorry, I turned off my video instead of turning on my mic. I guess I better pay more attention.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, Joe. I was gonna say that only after discussion today, it makes sense to me to do as many of them as we think is reasonable, because otherwise these zoning changes are gonna be chasing us. I would like to do something in the business and the commercial sense, even though ones aren't facing us right this second, perhaps, because they're bound to be coming up. I think the easiest way to do it, because they've been vetted and used in the past and we know what they mean, would be to use the temporary districts that were formerly county zoning and just adopt them as the joint planning or joint zoning commission classifications, and just have them allowed. I would also like to allow for city zoning, because as our two communities become blended over the years, there's going to be more times where, or not, maybe, when one of the zoning classes would fit better than the old county zoning. So if we could adopt in my opinion, from Westport staff's position, we could adopt the county zoning as permanent and allow for city zoning if that's something that the joint zoning commission wants to do, that we would be in the right spot.
Okay, Mark, Dean, thank you so much for your input and your hard work on this, and also thank you to Tom Wilson for his input as well.
And just to elaborate, Joe,
yeah.
this is the section of the code. I didn't put it in the packet, but it says special temporary zoning classifications. In multiple places, it talks about how these are only supposed to be temporary, and then it defines what those temporary ones are. There's county R1, county R1A, county R3, R3A, sorry for the scrolling, R4, rural homes 2, etc. There's AB, there's C1, C2, etc. So those are all the ones that were inherited as legacy old county zoning districts. And these, you could pick some of these or all of these and just consider them to be eligible as a permanent zoning classification.
Have you, Dean, made a list of which ones you think would be appropriate to apply?
Well, the A2 specifically, and the C1 or C2, or both C1, C2. The Yahara materials would probably be best suited for C2.
Okay.
But we're just, what I worry about is picking just some of these. We may end up with others too. So
Sure.
it's
Right.
the question is, what do the philosophy here, and what I wanted to talk to Tom about today is, what was the original thinking? What was the reason why this was done? And the idea was that anything in our ETZ with Westport would, if it rezones, would eventually assume as a city zoning ordinance classification. Of course, in the last few weeks, specifically last Tuesday, the city council adopted a new zoning ordinance. It takes effect this Friday. The zoning ordinance that was adopted is quite a bit different from what was in place when we entered into the ETZ agreement, the intergovernmental agreement with Westport. So we have had a significant change. So what we are wanting to know is whether this committee feels we should just give more flexibility to retain the former classifications, recognizing that some properties adjacent to the city may end up annexing and just assume a city zoning classification anyway. And Erin has her hand up.
Yeah, I see that. Aaron, would
Oh,
you
sorry,
like?
that was
comment?
exactly my question for curiosity back when this was written, what the purpose ever was for temporary zoning codes, but you just answered that, Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, we've had some discussions at Westport of, and I think we brought it up before this committee in the past as well, of some confusion because we have part of Westport is under its own zoning authority, part of Westport's under Middleton zoning authority, and part of Westport is under Wanakee's zoning authority. And at some point, it would be our desire to adopt a standard for all three of those, just so it's consistent when we have residents calling and asking for what their setbacks are, or how big a garage they can build, or whatever it might be, that we can give them a consistent answer across, regardless of where they're at in Westport. With that said, our goal has been to work on our Middleton portion of it in hopes of it someday of exploring that and maybe starting with this as our foundation, and maybe we'll have enough here that it's just getting Wanakee to agree to it, and we already have it on the Middleton side, and we're all good. So with that said, does anybody have any comments or questions for Mark or Dean?
Joe, you asked about if we had a list, and I don't think we do. I think we're a little bit ahead of that.
Sure.
Just wondering if this kind of approach makes sense. And once it does, we can distill it. One of the things, Mark, we have to be careful of, it just occurred to me that we did quite a bit of work on these building heights and setbacks and all that stuff for accessory buildings. And so that would have to be considered as we go ahead. I don't want to step over that as we maybe adopt some of this county zoning again. So let's be careful of that. Other than that, I don't have any other comments, but I sure am available for questions.
Okay. Do any members of the committee have any questions, comments? Okay. It would be
Sorry.
go ahead. Who's,
Well, what I was saying is essentially what I wanted was a philosophical discussion about what direction we should go before I start editing the ordinance that we just
Sure.
recodified.
Yeah. So Cindy had a question. Cindy, or would you like to make comment or question?
Yeah, just a question, Dean, so what you said is kind of a blend of if I heard you right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was kind of a blend of adopting some of the Dane County zoning codes, but making anything that would be affected by a city zoning code. Is that what you were saying?
No, not really. What I was saying is that our commission here went through quite a bit of work to adopt those 3 residential codes, including accessory buildings and heights and setbacks and all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to throw that out while we adopt some of these old county residential codes. So we have to
Okay,
and so as far as the city codes, I'd like to have them available as an option if now or in the future something comes along that fits better. But I would think that we were probably going to find ourselves using this blended code between the new residential stuff that we've done and the business and commercial that we're adopting and fitting in from the old county zoning. I think that's what we're going to end up with, but that's your choice. That would be my suggestion on the staff level.
so we'd have to go through each one of those codes and make sure that it doesn't conflict with something that we've changed recently,
Yeah,
and then decide if that was going to work or not.
yes. Yeah,
I-
that's fair to say. I mean, I think staff can get you pretty close, but there'll be a point where you're going to want to review that before you pass it.
My concern would be the confusion of having both Middleton and Westport classifications available. I think the Middleton classification should be an exception and not a rule. Unless it's land that's going to be potentially annexed, especially if it's future development land or commercial land that is adjoining Middleton. But I'd hate to see residential areas that are maybe adjacent to Middleton, because it gets to be a little bit more confusing offering all these additional zoning classifications. But getting back to what Mark's request was, I would also be in favor of just adopting some of the county zoning classifications and bringing them in. I think that would be the simplest and least confusing.
And that's where as I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, including with our discussion with Tom today, that to me is by far the simplest option because we're familiar with this code. And I looked at the Wanakee code, and there's a lot of similarities with the Middleton code because it took those county standards.
Right.
At the same time, the county updated its zoning ordinance a few years ago. I don't know when it was, but sometime in the last 20 years. So they obviously felt the need to advance their code, but it's not reflected now in the Westport code. So
The likelihood of these classifications, it's probably I think what we adopted back in October and November is going to cover most of it, and these are probably going to be fewer uses in this classification just because they were temporary in the past.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I don't see it being like a lot of people asking for these. Cindy, you had a question?
No, that's right, Joe. I think that we're going to be using the residential stuff more often than not.
Right.
And those we worked on pretty hard, but the business and commercial zoning that we haven't looked at all really haven't been addressed in the new code for Middleton or ours. So we need something, and I think that they are going to be outliers, but there's still going to be some. And
Yeah.
so I'd like to take the gamut of things that aren't residential and have them available. The only reason I was talking about Middleton, and I agree, is it should be an option, but a non-standard option if it was just a better fit. You know,
I would say not by right. I would say an exception. Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
fair, Mark?
correct. It wouldn't be by right necessarily. It's what we would choose it to be. For the situation, right, Mark? Is that fair to say?
so I missed something. So you said you don't want something by right, Joe. What did you mean? From the Middleton code?
Interjecting the Middleton zoning code as well. I think that should be an exception and not by right.
I will talk with our city attorney about that. I don't have a concern about that specifically. I don't have an objection to that, I should say. But
Okay.
the way that Tom described it today is the intent with the old city code was that any of those zoning districts would be available for zoning classification in the ETZ area for Westport. With our
But
new
that was under
code,
the
our new
old zoning code, right?
well, it was with the old zoning code, and I think we need to clarify that if that's the intent, because the new code is more urban and less. I think from what I've sensed, it's of less interest to Westport to have our new zoning code standards apply.
Yeah, I can only
So-
speak for myself, but that would be consistent with my understanding as well.
So rather than take all of these into consideration, is there a possibility for these two projects that are on the table that they apply to just convert those current county zoning codes to permanent? If there's a concern about, raking through all of this information.
That's the simplest way is to make permanent or make eligible these temporary classifications as permanent classifications. That would be the easiest way to do it. And that's the way it was done for that one application, the Jankowskis. I'm still thinking about what Tom said at lunch, and I'm not sure how legally that was handled, to be honest. But he basically said there was really no other option, but yet the ordinance wasn't changed to allow it. So I would be, since this is now happening with two projects on the table, one that would be Ag 2, A2, and the other would be commercial. I think we just need to fix the problem in the ordinance so that we don't have to look the other way with stuff. It just makes me uncomfortable to have to look the other way. So the easiest fix is to take this language like C2, for example, and just say, okay, this is eligible as a permanent zoning classification. The easiest, well, the very straightforward way is to say where we have, this language may be zoned any of the zoning classifications in this section except for it's not letting me, except for use of the county A1 district, which is, so in other words, you cannot rezone to anything in this section except for A1. We could just add a couple other zoning districts saying those are eligible. That's the easiest text way to handle it, but I would much rather just get rid of the section altogether and just say these are zoning classifications that are now eligible for permanent status. I need to talk to our city attorney about this and how this is structured. But what I wanted to know is whether we are just cherry picking certain zoning classifications or whether we should just treat all the temporary classifications and make them all eligible as permanent, if you will.
I
That's-
would be more in favor of cherry picking
Okay,
and selecting the ones that we feel are appropriate or would be needed.
Yeah, that's the sense I was getting from Westport and why I brought it up, Mark, just so that this doesn't become a, not pointing fingers either way, but so it's not a long drawn out process. And all due respect to Westport, they want to review this. Everyone spent a lot of time on it. So I feel like selecting a few might be an easier way forward at this time.
and the way this is written, and I wasn't involved in this several years ago when this was done, but A1 ag was added as this exception. And it says for farmland preservation tax credit purposes. So I don't know if that was a state law or I don't know what prompted that, but clearly they made an exception for the tax credit reason. If we allow C2 and A2 in here, that's not a tax credit issue, So I think what I need to do is talk, based on your feedback tonight, I need to talk to the city attorney to see what route he prefers. Maybe what we just do is we extract those zoning districts that we feel need to be in the permanent section and put them above in the permanent section, where they would join SR4 and ER1 and CR5 as eligible permanent zoning districts. So I think I've gotten some feedback already from a couple of you to know you'd rather cherry pick instead of allowing all of them.
Mark, my only other request would be that you continue to work with Dean as well as a ton of Westport attorneys.
Of course.
Yeah, okay, that would be it. Other than that, I don't know if anybody else, Mary, I see you stepped in. Do you have any comments? Okay, hearing none.
Who is your town of Westport attorney now?
Bill Cole.
Oh, it is Bill. Okay.
And yeah, I think we don't have to adopt them all, but it's gonna get close because if we already have the residential under control and the ag is under control and we're talking about the extra ag, A2 or whatever, that leaves only B and C pretty much and the subsections of R, which I think have got covered. So
Yeah, I don't think we need
as I
those.
said at the onset, Mark and I have to go through these and figure out which ones apply and make a list for you. And I think we can do that. And so without overcomplicating it, I'd like to have this once and done so that every time someone comes along and they don't fit into a category or another, we don't have to change the code. It doesn't make sense to do that either.
I agree.
I would just note that the A2 district, the way the old code, which we just copied into the current code, the way it handles that, I found really odd. It basically has these 5 categories. So county A2, parentheses 1, parentheses 2, 4, 8, and 16, depending on the acreage. Does that mean that they were zoned A21 and A22 and A24? Is that what they were zoned? Dean, do you happen to know, or any of you?
I don't.
Because I don't understand why. I would just call it A2 and just say it's anything under 35 acres and just keep it simple. I don't know why we need to give them a different, I think this was an intent to give them different zoning. I'd rather just call it county A2 and not have these subheadings. Anything that has to do with acreage is still spelled out separately.
Well, it looks like what they're doing is using those to define the animal units, doesn't it?
Right, but that can still be there regardless of whether
Sure.
it's called A1, 2. I want to get rid of this. This seems unnecessary.
Well,
I agree.
the Dane County zoning was less than perfect, I can tell you that.
Well, I get that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that as I was looking through this, I saw another glitch, and that is in section 350206, which was the ag temporary, or the I'm sorry, the ag section. Let me pull that up so that we all are looking at the same thing. So I don't understand how I made this. I must have been so focused on the residential component that I lost track of this edit. So this is how the ag transition district currently reads. And it says that permitted and conditional uses shall be the same right here. Shall be the same as the city's former ag district. Let's see, 35020223A. I think that's an erroneous reference. So that's what this was. I just was bringing these in from what the former reference was. The point is, I might present that to you as an edit as well. I'll double check this though. There shouldn't be this shouldn't be a surprise. I think I might have made a mistake with the original editing of the document. So I will go back to our city attorney and then work with Dean and your attorney, Bill, to make edits to the document reflecting the discussion today. Which classification, are you basically leaving it up to us to decide which classifications to carry forward into the, okay.
In draft form, I think that would be, I'd be comfortable with that,
Okay.
but I want them to see what we're doing.
Okay. That's fine with me.
Okay, what else do we have? Nothing else on here?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, would anybody have any other comments or anything that they would like to add to a future agenda?
So Mark, what would be the next steps in this if you're coming up with a draft form?
Well, so I need to take some time with our city attorney. I will give him this instruction in the next 2 days. I am out next week, but he frankly will need some time to work on this as well. I know we have 2 pending applications, the one for cruise checks. I know they're, from talking with Dean, they have some patience. I don't know about the other application, what the timeline is for them, but obviously we want to get this going. We need to then schedule a public hearing before this body on the zoning ordinance changes, the ETZ ordinance changes.
Dean, do you know when we received the application from the cruise checks, or are we getting into a time issue?
We are.
The 90 days?
Well, cruise checks have given us an extension. They're
Right.
fine.
I
Okay,
asked him for that.
Yeah,
okay,
so we're fine legally with the cruise checks, and Yahara Materials is asking to be on the JZC at the end of March. So we'd
Okay.
like to have something for them. That's only a consultation at that point. We don't have to act on it, but we're gonna have to start the process in March with them.
okay.
So
Um,
what I need to do is bring you a revised ordinance. Unless you would like me to revise the ordinance and then just go ahead and schedule the hearing. I mean, that would expedite it, but given my vacation schedule with next week and our normal meeting schedule, if we met at the end of March, the problem with that is March 27th falls during spring break in Middleton. I don't know if that's an issue for any of the Middleton reps with the Wanakee school district, or with the Middleton school districts. I don't know what Wanakee's spring break is, or if that's an issue for you, Joe or Mary, or
Way too old for that, Mark.
that's, well, I didn't want to make any assumptions. Didn't want to make any assumptions.
Well, March 27th, we have the Yara Materials consult, so it would be, either we're gonna have to reschedule the whole thing, or else we could talk about this at the same time. And that wouldn't be too late for Yara Materials, and I don't think cruise checks matter.
So maybe what we could do is come back to the March 27th meeting with the proposed ordinance revision and then schedule the hearing for, I mean, we need a few weeks to have that properly noticed, which would be at the earliest end of April. What I'm proposing is, in the interest of efficiency, we could have the joint zoning committee meet at the same time as the council. They are each required to have a hearing. We could just have one hearing in the joint meeting, which has been done in the past. That would be the first Tuesday of May. We don't have to do it that way, but it's just an idea.
That would be fine with me.
Works
That'd be
for,
fine with me.
Works for me.
I can make it happen.
All right, so I think what I'm hearing is I don't need to schedule a public hearing in the next 4 weeks. I just need to get the ordinance revised for your consideration on the 27th of March. And will we have at least one Middleton rep available for that meeting?
I will.
Okay. Nick, are you available?
I'm gonna be out of town.
Okay. And then Chris, are you available that March 27th if necessary?
yeah,
Okay, all right, so we'll have a quorum.
Okay, sounds great. Sounds like we got a plan here. Any
All right,
other
thank you.
comments?
Nope, that's all I have.
Okay, I'd like the record to show that Mary Mannering did attend.
Yep.
She showed up shortly after we did roll call, so.
I have her check in after the approval of the minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Well.
Sorry,
go
sorry.
ahead,
One
Aaron.
more thing, if we're doing a joint meeting in May, is that May 7th, Mark?
It would be May 7th. Yep.
Okay, that's my son's birthday, so I just wanted to flag that ahead of time so I don't
Oh,
make
that's
plans. and
My
then-
son's birthday too.
All right. Well, I'm sure he's not gonna cry because mine's turning 8, so I just want to
Okay.
make sure that I replan the family stuff appropriately.
Well, I mean, we could have the hearing theoretically on April 24th for the joint zoning committee, and then the council could have their own hearing on May 7th, so we'd have 2 hearings. I mean, that would be the other way to do it.
I'd be okay
Yeah,
with
I don't-
that.
I feel like my fellow plan commission and parks people might prefer to condense the meeting, so I would rather condense it myself. So yeah, preference on May 7th over the last Wednesday in April.
I don't know
Mhm.
how a Tuesday is for Westport folks.
It's
I
not an
think it
issue.
makes sense to have one.
Nick and Chris, is that okay with you two?
Should be, yeah.
Okay.
yep. May 7th is open as far as any other official meetings in Westport. So we're fine.
Okay.
Okay, so unless anybody else, anything else they'd like to add, we need one more motion.
I'll make the
Summer?
motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Motion
Summer,
by
second.
Mary. Would
Yes.
anybody like the second?
I think I
Summer,
saw
second.
Aaron second.
Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Aye.
I,
Hi.
Okay, none opposed, motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks so much, Mark and Dean.
Yep.
Good night, all.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.